So we should be sharing there. You can see how to convert more opportunities to customers. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? Today, like in the next 30 minutes, I'm going to teach you how to convert more opportunities to customers. That's why you're here. This is what I want to see, to get a little bit of engagement here, and post in the chat. What's your conversion rate right now? When you look at your conversion from opportunities to customers. So confirmed opportunity, they're interested in evaluating your solution. How many of those actually turn into customers for you? Give it just a second. Looking at them rolling in. 20%, 35%. They got some good numbers here. So the average, and this is from, I think HubSpot sales did, HubSpot does a annual review of the state of sales and the state of marketing. And the average, this was 2023 numbers, but the average sales team closes 22% of their opportunities. So about 1 in 5. You get legitimate opportunities, about 1 in every 5 opportunities turn into customers. The best sales teams can close 40%, 45%, even 50%. And so, what causes there to be such a difference between average and great? And I believe if you've got a good product, you can deliver value to your customers, you can get your close rate to be much, much higher. And I try to lean into the, if it's art and science, I lean away from the art and try to find the science version of this. What's the practical way that you can run a process and just get more of your opportunities to turn into revenue for the business? So I do have to dangle a carrot. Stay till the end. I do have a free gift for you. Got to stay around to get it. And then a few more warnings that I want to get through as we get into the content get into the content this afternoon, excuse me. So if this feels oversimplified, it's because it is. I'm taking a lot of years of experience trying to boil it down to 30 minutes. And so we're going to go quickly through a lot of big concepts. These are 201 and 301 level concepts in sales execution. But you all are very smart and you'll follow right along. And if you have questions, you can always reach out to me. Be happy to explain it further. Another warning, I'm assuming you already have a good sales pipeline. We're not going to talk about generating opportunities. We're not going to talk about prospecting or anything like that. I'm assuming you have a pipeline that you need to work and your team needs to close more of that pipeline. That's what we're going to talk about today. The other thing I'm going to assume is that you have product market fit. I'm not here to help you improve your product to make it a better fit for your customers. I'm not going to talk about product marketing or messaging or any of that. I'm going to assume you have that. We're going to get pretty tactical in how you actually take sales conversations and turn them into customers. Okay. And then the last thing I always like to warn, we call this the forgetting curve or the dummy curve, or more politically correct, the adoption challenge. And the idea is that within an hour, you will have forgotten like half of the things we talk about. This time tomorrow, you will have forgotten 70% of it. And then this time next week, you will have forgotten 90% of it. So my recommendation is revisit the slide deck, revisit the recording, reach out, let's talk about it, because the more you revisit the stuff, the more you talk about it within your teams, the more it will become, more likely it'll become a habit for your team. You have to revisit the stuff over and over and over again. That's how you create habits, because the forgetting curve is real and you do forget the things that we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about where this comes from. So this was at Levelset early on, like before 2018, we always struggled with our close rate. We had high inbound lead volume. We had high outbound lead volume. So we could generate opportunities seemingly at will. The challenge was when we would get into an opportunity or a sales conversation, our close rate was like sometimes 15%, sometimes 20%, just depending on the month. And so we were below average. And it gave me fits. I was so frustrated with not closing more of the opportunities that we had in our pipeline. And so something had to change. We had to figure something out. And then we changed something in the Q3 or Q4 of 2018. And after that, our close rate went up, like doubled to 40% plus on the deals where we ran this playbook that we're going to talk about today. So we implemented this new playbook. I call it the 4 keys. We started it at the end of Q4 in 2018. And from that point forward, we committed to running this on every single deal. Now, candidly, we didn't run it with 100% accuracy on 100% of the deals. Welcome to running a large sales team. It's really hard to get everybody to do everything in lockstep on every single opportunity, but we gave it a good effort and we had tons of enablement, and you should too. Think about this when you're training your team. It's not just giving them access to some book or some training deck or running one afternoon enablement session to teach them how to run opportunities better. You have to revisit this stuff to make sure that every single one of these steps gets run on every single deal. That's what worked for us. And that's how we got to a 40% plus close rate with a good portion of our pipeline. So what did we actually do that caused our close rate to double? And today we're going to talk through a ton of background on like why customers decide not to buy, how to navigate the buying process when you're selling to a buying group, which is what you're doing when you're selling to businesses and B2B, enterprise sales. And then we're going to talk about the actual plays that you can run on every single opportunity. And today you can implement at least 2 or maybe even 3 of these things with your team and immediately increase your close rate, or at least increase certainty around whether or not a deal is going to close. So let's get into why aren't your customers buying. I have the picture of the Heisman Trophy here. We used to call it the Heisman objection. Like whenever you're going to close a customer, you're trying to get to the next step, but you're asking for the money and it feels like they're giving you the Heisman. The idea behind this is you get all kinds of objections in the sales process. You'll have people say that it's too expensive, or it's not the right time. Call me back in June, or call me back in Q4, or maybe there's a competing priority. I remember one of the things that we would run into often is we're implementing a new ERP system. If the videos were on, if I did a show of hands, I bet you there's at least a handful of folks on this call who have run into that objection. Oh, we're implementing a new ERP system, or we're switching CRMs, and so we can't take on a new priority. I believe that all of these objections are actually false objections. The Heisman objections are false objections, which means that the customer is giving that as a reason, kind of as a scapegoat, because they don't want to say the real reason for why they don't want to buy your product. And the real reason, it's either a reflection on you as a salesperson, or it's a reflection on them as the customer. If it's a reflection on you as the salesperson, it's because you didn't establish enough value in the deal. You didn't establish that you and your product or your solution is actually going to deliver the goods for that customer. And so they're just not interested, but they don't want to tell you that you didn't do a good job. They'll say something like, oh, you ran a great sales presentation or ran a great sales process. That's usually like, a real red flag that you're going to lose that deal, because they're just placating you, right? So that's on you. You didn't establish enough value. The other that's, I think, more common, or at least my experience is that it's more common, is that it's on the customer or the champion. They actually don't know how to buy your product, or maybe they do know how to buy your product. They're just afraid. They don't buy things very often, and they don't want to stick their neck out to go advocate for the company to buy your product. And it's like indecision. They're overwhelmed with indecision because they don't actually know how to do it. So let's dig into this a little bit, because this is a really important concept. Before we start talking about specific plays that you can run with an opportunity to get more customers and to convert more opportunities to customers, we got to understand why people don't buy in the first place. So I have 2 example buyer personas here. One is the champion. So champion is the person who's going to advocate for your product and be the person who recommends that the company buy your product. And then you have an economic buyer, an executive, a VP, maybe it's the owner, maybe it's the CEO, depending on the size of business that you're selling to. But anytime you have 2 or more people together making a purchasing decision, it's called a dysfunctional buying group. I learned this from my good friend, Steve Richard. Steve had a company, Exec Vision, that he sold a couple of years ago. But Steve's like pound for pound the best salesperson I've ever met. And he taught me this idea about dysfunctional buying groups. And the idea is simple. It's that humans are imperfect at sharing information with each other, especially in a company where there's politics, or people are jockeying for a raise, or to get access to an exciting new project, or maybe they just are not performing well and they don't want to get fired. I mean, there's all kinds of perverse incentives that people have in a workplace. And so when you're relying on, a single stakeholder that you're selling to to go communicate and corral the buying group in the organization to go buy your product, you're putting a lot of trust in that person to communicate really effectively about your product. And let's be honest, they're not salespeople, or most likely, but they're not salespeople for your product. And so you want to make sure that you are on the same side of the table with that champion, helping them advocate. And better yet, and we'll talk about this in a minute, better yet, if you can pull that economic buyer into the early part of the sales process with you. Okay. So the real reason why your customers are buying, this is like if you do a win-loss analysis and you go back and look at the last 20 deals that were closed lost, and you look at the reasons why the customer said they didn't want to move forward, you're going to see those Heisman objections. You'll see things like pricing or timing or competing priority or whatever. And you have to be skeptical whenever you read that data in your CRM, or maybe it's just in your notes on the deal. And that's because that's the salesperson, or maybe it's your own interpretation of what the customer told you about why they decided not to move forward. But what I found is the real reason is business as usual, business as usual, do nothing, no decision, just status quo is so much easier. It's more comfortable. Change is hard. And people only change when, how do you say it? It's like when the pain of change is less painful than the pain of staying the same. People only change when their current status quo is so painful that the switching costs are actually less painful. It's important to understand. That's why customers fail to move forward. It takes a lot of conviction and energy to move from status quo. Think about that as you're trying to bring someone through their own buying process. You may see it as an obvious purchase for them, something that would very clearly make a difference for their business. But there's all kinds of inertia that's pointing them in the direction of staying in business as usual. And here are some examples. Switching costs are super high. And there's a lot of switching costs, not just the cost of what it takes to buy your software. It's also all of the soft costs of the time and attention and implementation and onboarding and training and education and everything that surrounds changing behavior. And that's a really hard thing. There's the risk of failure, right? So maybe they buy it and they implement it and it doesn't work out. That happens. It happens more often than you would probably like to admit, even with your own product. And so there's the risk of that. There's the risk that they might look bad. Let's say that they do buy the product and they can't champion it and they try to implement it and it doesn't go well. They're going to look bad. They're not going to be in line for that promotion that they want to get or that they've been working for. And then finally, we talked about this a minute ago. Maybe they just don't believe. They don't believe that your product's actually going to deliver the value that you are proposing or that you're promising that it'll deliver. And so all of these things are working against you. And so the key thing is you got to create alignment within that buying group, that dysfunctional buying group. You have to get your champion and your economic buyer and you all speaking the same language about why you're even evaluating this product, right? Why you would want to buy something like the product you're selling, what it's going to do, and how it's going to make an impact on the business, right? This is something that I love training on. This is, if you've ever read Spin Selling, it's a really a popular sales book. The guy who wrote it, Neil Rackham, he wrote this other book called Major Account Sales Strategy, real page turner, but it is chock full of good information. It's not, you're probably not going to cozy up on the couch with a cup of coffee on a Friday night and read through it, but it has some principles that have been true for the last 30 or 40 years that are still true today with enterprise sales and strategic sales. And it actually is the same is true for consumers making purchasing decisions. Every individual goes through an evaluation process where they go from their status quo, which changes over time, and then they recognize they have a need. Right? The pain of staying the same is painful. I need a change. I have a need. And then you look at options and then you resolve concerns around which options you think are the best fit. Then you make a decision. You buy something and you implement it. And then you have a new status quo. And it'll be fine for a while until it's time to change, right? Pretty straightforward. If it sounds familiar, you may have read this, or maybe you've heard me talk about it, but there's this idea of the 5 stages of awareness. This is really common in advertising. This as a graphic I put together that's inspired by the book breakthrough advertising. Eugene Schwartz was this famous copywriter from back in the 50s and 60s, who did a ton of research on human psychology and consumer behavior. And what he found was every buyer, whether they're buying for themselves or they're buying for a business, goes through these 5 stages of awareness, from being unaware that they have a problem, to being problem aware, and then identifying solutions that can solve the problem, then identifying products that can that are a possible solution that can solve the problem, and then they purchase the product and they're most aware. And that's just the linear version of the circle that we just looked at. It's 2 different ways to say the same thing. Okay, why is this important? It's important because let's say that champion, the person who's going to advocate for your product and make sure and go propose at the company and recommend that the company buy your product, you get this champion from status quo all the way through recognizing needs, evaluating options. You get them all the way to the point of decision. But the problem is they don't have the economic buying power to sign an agreement or write a check. Well, you got to bring in the economic buyer. And where's the economic buyer? They're all the way up at business as usual, status quo, right? And you know how this conversation goes. You may have even experienced it yourself, trying to get something in your own company bought. You go to the economic buyer and their arms are crossed and they're like, well, we don't need that. We don't even have any problems, right? They're just on 2 totally different stages of the buyer's journey. And that causes a ton of friction. I bet that if you are honest about where you're losing deals in your pipeline, this is where you're losing deals, is that you're betting on a single thread, one champion to go advocate for your business. And then they're going to the person who can actually sign the check, and they're misaligned on what the business needs. The opposite is true as well. You may have a CEO or a founder or an executive who does have the P&L responsibility, and they've gotten all the way through to make a decision. And then they go to their team, the team that actually has to live in the product and work with it day to day. And the team says, we don't have that problem. We don't want to implement this product. And that can cause the same amount of problems. Maybe it doesn't stop you from closing the deal because you have the ear of an economic buyer. You can get a CEO to buy something because it's their company and they can sign the check. But when they go to implement, you're going to have a ton of struggle getting the implementation to be successful. And that's going to be a churn risk, right? So getting alignment in the buyer's journey is super, super important to make sure that your opportunities close, right? The way that you get alignment is you create what we call a collective learning experience. And it's this idea that if you can get your economic buyer, the champion, whoever else is involved in the evaluation, bigger deals have more evaluators, smaller deals have fewer evaluators, but get as many of them involved in the sales process as early as possible so that they all have a shared understanding, the shared aha moment about what the priorities for the business are, what the needs are, and they can go through the evaluation together. Makes sense, pretty practical, but we skip this so often because, and I'm guilty of this as sales reps, we get on the phone and we get happy ears. We start talking to somebody, they get really excited, they're speaking our language, they're saying, what we're offering is interesting, and we just want to move them through the evaluation, show them the demo, get the agreement in front of them, try to get the signature. And we forget, it's not just this one person we're selling to. There's all kinds of people in the organization that might need to be influenced in order for us to get the yes. And so I say often, slow down to move quickly. This is one of those examples where you want to slow down so that you can move quickly. So as you think about getting alignment and getting deals to convert quicker and converting more deals to opportunities, I like to make sure we have a clear understanding of what an opportunity is in the first place. I talk with a ton of founders and executive sales leaders. And one thing that I find common across all of them is that there's no clear definition of what an opportunity is. If you go ask 4 or 5 people in your own organization to say, what's an opportunity? Do you think everybody's going to articulate that definition in the same way? Probably not. Here's how I define an opportunity. Feel free to steal mine. Every opportunity has the same criteria. They have to be a fit with your ideal customer profile, or ICP, right? The champion Oh, I've got my emojis for help. I don't know how to turn those off. If somebody could help me turn those off, email me. I've been trying for months. Okay, every opportunity has three criteria. Has to be a fit with your ICP. The champion has to be aligned with your buyer persona. And the real subheader here is your champion. I call it, you have to have the juice. The champion has to have the juice. They have to have enough influence in the organization to actually get the deal bought. Because if they don't have influence, then it's like a no influence, no authority. They'll talk your ear off and tell you all kinds of great things about how your product is going to help them and help the business, but they can't actually get the deal done because they don't have the influence. So make sure that the champion that you choose is aligned with your buyer persona. And then make sure your champion has expressed interest, either verbal or written, expressed interest in evaluating your product as a solution for the business. Super, super important. Okay. That's the definition of a good opportunity. Once you've identified a good opportunity and you get into the conversation, you have to run a really strong discovery process. And I'm not going to spend too much time on discovery just because that's its own 30-minute workshop that we can do. But the key to discovery is really getting on the same side of the table with your champion, understanding and defining what it is that the business needs and what the desired outcome is and what the current challenges are and how they are going to go about evaluating the solutions, not even pitching your product, like literally just setting up the evaluation with them. That's how you run discovery. My simple discovery hack for this, and by the way, you can go to martinroth.com/exec summary. I always in a deal, I try to put in black and white, what is the outline of the deal? Can I put on one page exactly what's going on in this evaluation? And if I can fill that out in the discovery process or shortly after the discovery process, then I feel like I've set the deal up for success. And the parts of this executive summary are really simple. Who are the key stakeholders? What are the current challenges of the business? What's the desired outcome that the business needs to achieve as a result of implementing whatever the solution is? Why your company, and this isn't in discovery, obviously, but eventually you need to outline why your company is the right partner for this customer. You want to estimate what the annual expenses are, and you can project some sort of expected return on investment. The other key why this document is super important is because this document is going to get floated around in the organization, and it allows you to have a voice in the conversations you're not allowed to be a part of. So there's so many water cooler conversations, or, hey, I just put something on your desk. Can you review that before the meeting coming up? You're not getting invited to those as a salesperson, but you can have a voice if you put this executive summary together with your champion. So that's just a quick hack. As you think about discovery, think about filling this out and how you would do that alongside the customer, right? Not for them, but sit with your champion and try to fill this out together. Really simple way to think about it. Okay, so how do you align with your champion? Forgive me, this is going to be a lot of words and text, but I'll get through it quickly. I have a few simple rules or heuristics for this. The first is, remember that this is a commercial relationship. You can be friendly with your champion, but you're not friends. This is a commercial relationship. You're going to ask them for money at the end of this. And so all of this is a commercial endeavor, and you should be clear about that. There is an exchange of value. You have to give them value, and they're going to give you money in return. That's what you're trying to work toward. And you don't have to be coy or beat around the bush. You can be upfront about this, and that's okay. They're expecting that, right? The second thing is you want to focus on educating the champion about their problem and the possible solutions. This goes back to the executive summary. You have to be able to articulate why the problems that they're experiencing are very common, because you've sold to a bunch of other customers, presumably, and your prospective customers' problems look just like your current customers' problems. And so you can educate them on what life looks like when they've addressed those problems and how to address those problems. I like to call this the city on the hill. When you're talking with a customer, illustrate for them what the city on the hill is that you're going to get them to. And you just are trying to invite them to get in your car so you can drive them to the city on the hill. So educate them about their problem, help them feel like they're not alone. Lots of people have had these problems and they've solved those problems, and you're going to show them how to do it. Third thing is set expectations for your evaluation process. This one seems obvious, but a lot of people don't do it. your customer probably doesn't buy things very often. So give them a mechanism for how they can evaluate your product and how they can make a purchase decision. And what I mean by set the expectations, I mean literally like write it out. We're going to talk about closing plans in a minute, but write down, hey, here's step 1 through 7 for how companies usually evaluate buying our product. You can use this. Follow it, steps 1 through 7. What you're listening for is one of two things. Either number one, they have a process and they're going to say, oh, hold on. I don't know where my camera went. Sorry about that, guys. Either they have a process and so they're going to say, oh, hey, I don't need your evaluation process. We'll just use our own. That's how we normally do it. And then the other option is they don't have a process and they're going to be very grateful that you've given them a way for them to evaluate your solution. So 2 ways to think about it. And then the final thing for aligning with your champion is, well, again, they probably don't know how to buy your product. So help them, which relates back to giving them an example evaluation process. So remember this, we showed it at the beginning of this call. We were struggling to close deals. We implemented a playbook. Here is the playbook. I'm going to lay them all out for you. We call it the 4 keys to unlock a deal. Very straightforward. The first thing is you have to find your champion. Champion's going to be somebody who is going to stick their neck out and advocate for your business or for your product or your business. And in advocating for your product or your business, they're going to recommend that the company buy it, and they're going to be coaching you through how to navigate the buying process within the business. Picking your champion is really important. If you don't have a good champion, it's really hard to close the deal. And so spend a lot of time hunting down and finding who the right champion is, and then getting on their side of the table to become a partner, right? The second thing is creating a closing plan. Again, really important. In a close, this is just a recommended closing plan. You want to have key stakeholders, key dates of each meeting and each key evaluation step. Technical evaluation, legal evaluation, financial evaluation. You can kind of front run some objections by laying out all of the potential meetings you might have. Dates for key deliverables. So, for example, you may need a data sample from your customer, or you may need for them to give some piece of information to you, and that's a key step in getting toward them evaluating the product. So outline those pieces that are specific to your sales process. I say this one over and over again, and people, for whatever reason, they don't do it. But like, set a date for the closing call. Actually, if you remember nothing else from this entire presentation, take this one thing away. Every single deal that you have in your pipeline that's late stage, where you feel like you're going to close it, there should be a closing call on the calendar. It doesn't mean that you're actually going to sit there and watch them over Zoom and like watch them sign the agreement or send the check. But you can have a closing call that's 10 minutes long. That is a confirmation that the agreement's been signed. It's a confirmation of what happens next in the onboarding and the handoff, right, to the next phase of the relationship. But put a closing call on the calendar. And if the customer misses the closing call, then you know that you have a potential objection you got to go handle. So put closing calls on the calendar with every single deal. You need the implementation timeline and key date so that they understand what they're getting into after they execute the agreement. And then most importantly, you need a go live date. The go live date is when you actually turn the product on in software, or you deliver the deliverable if you're selling services, and the customer starts to receive the value that they signed up for. So outline a closing plan, share it with them, send it by email if you have to, put it in a document, make it more formal, put it in a FedEx envelope and overnight it to them. It doesn't matter, just put something in front of the customer, because what happens is your champion is going to use that closing plan document, just like the executive summary. The closing plan and the executive summary, they go hand in hand together, and they get circulated within the organization so that the buying group is aligned on their side. There's my reminder. Schedule a closing call. Take a screenshot, print it out, put it on your wall. Remember, every deal needs to have a closing call on the calendar. Third thing, this is another easy thing that you can implement today, is every time you get off the phone with a customer, make sure you have a clear next step that's confirmed, that's on their calendar and on your calendar. Send a calendar invite, make sure that they accept it on the call. And it can be a little aggravating. I understand if you're not in the habit of doing it, but once you get in the habit of doing it, you'll find that it just makes communication so much easier because the expectations are clear with the customer. And finally, you need a compelling event. I like to manufacture compelling events. by offering a discount on this on the annual license or on the service by so long as the customer agrees and sign and executes the agreement within a certain time frame. But let's back up here. What is a compelling event? Oftentimes you'll hear customers say things like, "Oh, we really need to make a decision by the end of the month." Or another one that I've experienced before is, "Oh, we're sunsetting our agreement with our previous provider and we need to make a switch." Those can be compelling events, but I've found that even those, we need to do it by the end of the month, it's kind of a soft date. It's not a hard date. A compelling event to me is a defined date that's attached to an economic incentive. And so the reason I like discounts, and they do work if you do it right. The best selling organizations in the world, Salesforce and HubSpot and corporate executive board, all of the best and highest, what's the ADP, like all of the best and highest performing sales organizations in the world use discounts to drive timeline on deals. The reason discounts don't work in some cases is because it's almost like a lazy way to get confirmation from the customer. The customers will say something, or sales reps will say something like, if you close or if you sign our agreement by the end of the week, I'll give you $1,000 off your annual subscription. It doesn't really work like that. Customers can smell the desperation when you're offering a discount in that way. The only way that it actually works is when you have a clear closing plan, you've scheduled the closing call, and you say, "Okay, great, we have a plan for when we're going to execute our agreement. We want to invest in this partnership by way of $1,000 discount on your annual subscription. The only thing that we ask is that you execute our agreement on that date that we said we were going to execute it." It's an important distinction. The customer's already decided that they want to move forward. They've already made the purchase decision. You're using an economic incentive to drive certainty with the timing of when the agreement gets signed. And I get a lot of pushback on this from just other people who run different sales processes. They'll say, "Well, if you already have the decision from the customer, why would you give up the $1,000 or whatever your discount is? Or why would you give up free onboarding or anything else that you're offering as an economic incentive?" And my answer is the same always, which is a deal today is worth any amount of deals tomorrow. I want certainty around timeline, and time kills all deals. And so if we can get certainty and pull a decision forward by offering a discount, it gives a lot more control. And the customer likes it too, because they get economic benefit. Everybody wins. So that's it. Those are the 4 keys. Like I said just a minute ago, discounts work if you do it right. Champion, then closing plan, then discount. So the 4 keys, just in order. Number 1, make sure you have a champion. Number 2, create a closing plan and share it with your champion. Build it with them if you can. Number 3, confirm next steps on every single call. And number 4, manufacture a compelling event. And those are the 4 keys. Here's the deal. It takes like 90 days to implement this across the team. It takes a while for habits to change. But if you implement this, I guarantee that your close rate is going to increase if you do this on 100% of your deals. I'm not saying you're going to double it in 90 days, but I know for sure if you run this playbook on 100% of your deals, your close rate will increase. It's easy as that. So just go do it, and then you'll make more money. So, like I said, I have a gift for you. I outlined all of the 4 plays and everything related to this playbook. You just got to go to martinroth.com/4keys. You can get it. I'll send it to you, and it talks about how to scale from 1 to 10 and 10 to 20 and beyond. And then for me, right, if you want more, there's a couple ways to work with me. One is I have a course that is not related to closing deals. It's around prospecting and generating more pipeline. It's called Clockwork Prospecting. You can get it at martinroth.com/clockwork. And then the other thing, if you want to work more closely together, I do one-on-one coaching from time to time. I have limited spots, but if it's the right fit and you want to learn more, you can go to martinroth.com/revup and learn more about working one-on-one together. And with that, I will open it up to questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and wonder why there are no chats coming in. I must have